Hey YouTube, the Operation Team Sorcerers here, excuse me, and welcome back to What If Wednesday. And it's another Robot Wars one, and one I've thought about doing for a really long time. And this one is about Firestorm, one of my all-time favourites. And, well, as you can tell from the title, it goes back to its Series 4 fight against Dominator 2, which I think was a bullshit judge's decision. Then again, Series 4, I guess, was pretty notorious for having judges' decisions which were questionable, like especially when it came to Firestorm versus the Morgue and Really Big Cheese against suicidal tendencies. Maybe I'll cover those in another episode, but for now, we're going to see what would have happened if Firestorm 2 won that judge's decision against Dominator 2. Yeah, I don't really agree with it. Alright, yes, it is argued that Dominator 2 got it on damage, but there wasn't really a lot of it, like one or two hits with the axe, along with the fact that it had Firestorm pinned at one point, but it wasn't really a lot. I mean, I think Firestorm 2 should have won on aggression, and I also read somewhere that apparently if the fight went on longer, Dominator 2's batteries would have died. I'm not saying that's what happened, I'm just saying that's what I heard. But, yeah. Anyway, on to the topic. So, let's say Firestorm got the judge's decision, and, again, robots will follow the same path as much as possible. Like, it'll make sense as I explain it. So Firestorm 2 would then go on to face Pussycat. So yeah, they'd meet 1 year early, and it would be a lot of the same as the Series 5 fight. I mean, maybe Pussycat could get some hits with the sword, but I don't think that many, really. I genuinely do think Firestorm 2 would still beat Pussycat here, no problem. Of course, even if somehow Pussycat did win, then nothing changes. And the seeds for the 5th Wars would still be the same, but I do think Firestorm 2 would win here and go through to the grand final instead. And it would be almost the same lineup as Series 3. I say almost because we have Stinger in the grand final instead of Steg. So now Firestorm 2 will go on to face Hypnodisc, like 1 year earlier than in the real timeline. But this time, I don't think Firestorm 2 will get so lucky. The armour isn't as strong as in later series, and Hypnodisc will just get in lots of hits and do some nice damage. Now, that would be more significant than anything Dominator 2 or Pussycat who would have done. I'm sure Firestorm 2 could last the bout, but I don't see it winning here, so chances are it would go to a judge's decision and Hypnodisc would win, and then go on to face Chaos 2 in the grand final, which would mean that Firestorm would face Stinger in the playoff. it should be repairable enough. I can't see a reason why Firestorm 2 wouldn't be ready. And obviously it wouldn't be an easy fight. Stinger is a slippery customer, but Firestorm can take him. It'll be more controlled and aggressive, and definitely shove it a bit, and maybe flip it a few times. So it could be more of the same as the Pussycat fights, only Stinger is more slippery. Stinger could get hits in, but again, no significant damage, I would think. It would get shoved around by Firestorm a lot, flipped over, even though flippers don't do much against Stinger, unless it gets flipped out the arena. But of course, I don't think Firestorm would be able to flip Stinger out the arena. And this goes on for a while, and once again it will go to the judges, and Firestorm would once again take third place. Almost pretty much every single fight Firestorm 2 has gone to the judges. The only exception is the first round and the Tag Team Terror Grand Final that year. So with that out of the way, the Grand Final is the same as the year before, Chaos 2 against Hypnodisc. Now, I'm not so sure Chaos 2 would be lucky here. Now, again, I'm going with best guess here. That's what these what-ifs are down to at the end of the day. It's just best guess. Now, I don't think Chaos 2 would have a chance to flip Hypnodisc out the arena. This version is so much better than the Series 3 version. It's faster, better controlled, more manoeuvrable. Hypnodisc might get flipped over a couple of times, but I think Hypnodisc will be able to hit Chaos 2 on the side a few times, and go a similar way to how the fights with Bulldog Breed went. And should this keep up, at least one of the sides will just be banged in a bit too much and jam up one of the wheels, leaving Chaos 2 immobile on one side. And with this damage done, Hypnodisc is crowned the Series 4 champion, and Chaos 2 is dethroned. Now, of course, I could be wrong here, so I'm not saying that's definitely what would happen. I'm saying that's what's likely to happen. So again, don't flame me if I get anything wrong. Educate me. Don't belittle me. So with this, the seeds would be slightly different, but not that much. So in terms of the Series 5 seeds, it would be 1 Hypnodisc, 2 Chaos 2. I feel like Razor would still be seeded third, because it's the world champion. Firestorm 3 would be 4th. Stinger would still be seeded 5th. Panic Attack would still be seeded 6th. But this time Pussycat would be seeded 7th. And then all the other seeds would remain exactly the same. Now, I'm sure you can... Now, there is a Robot Wars wiki, so I'm sure you can easily find out the seedings for Series 4, 5, 6 and 7. So, yeah, for the sake of simplicity, all their first round battles will be exactly the same, only the battles will be switched around a bit. So in this case, Hypnodisc and Black Widow would be in Heat A instead of Chaos 2 and Stormforce, for instance. But don't worry, we'll go over it. So, Hypnodisc against Black Widow, that still happens, as well as the other fights from Heat A in that timeline. So, Smidsy would beat Obsidian, 8645T would beat T-Bone, and Steel Avenger would beat Tartan Terror. And then, as a result, Hypnodisc would face off against Steel Avenger and just trash it. Absolutely trash it. Steel Avenger, unfortunately, wouldn't stand a chance against Hypnodisc. I do like Steel Avenger, but yeah, that's what would happen. And then Smidsy, of course, beats 8645T in the same way, and then the two seeds face off in the Heat final. I don't know if Smidsy would be able to shove Hypnodisc around a lot or really do much to it anyway. I mean, Hypnodisc would just keep coming at Smidsy over and over again. Whether or not the lifter would break is another matter. I know, I think Smidsy had its rear disc on by this point, but I don't think Smidsy would get a chance to use it on Hypnodisc. So, yeah, it could last for a while and be a real grind match, but ultimately Hypnodisc would win on a judge's decision. So going into Heat B, Razor and Big Nipper are there instead of Hypnodisc and Black Widow. So, of course, Razor beats Big Nipper as usual. Bulldog Breed beats Juggernaut. Lamsey beats Walwatt, and Atomic beats Can Opener. So yeah, you can kind of see the pattern we're going with now. So Razor would once again go up against Atomic. Now I did cover this matchup in one of the previous episodes, but I'm just not sure Atomic would beat Razor. I don't see a scenario where it could happen, especially with the way Razor is by that point. So Razor would just crush Atomic here and there and just simply go through, and then Razor will go on to face Bulldog Breed in the Heat final. And again, I don't see Bulldog Breed beating Razor. I think Razor might be able to crush Bulldog Breed. I'm not sure. I can't remember exactly what Bulldog Breed is made of, but it must be some really hard stuff, considering that not even Hypnodisc could slice through it. But yeah, Razor would just wrestle with Bulldog Breed and have a lot more control. And ultimately, Razor would go through to the series semi-finals. So then Heat C, well, because Stinger's still seeded 5th, nothing changes. Then Heat D, we've got Pussycat and the Executioner there instead of Firestorm and Decapitator. So yeah, Pussycat then beats the Executioner in the same way as before, and will then face off against Sir Chromalot, a rematch from Celebrity Robot Wars. Now, even though Chromalot does have a flipper at this point, I don't see Chromalot beating Pussycat. I mean, that flipper wouldn't do much, so Pussycat would just keep coming at Sir Chromalot with the saw. And just doing significant damage. um, and would even nudge it around. Um, Plus, so Chromalot isn't as quick as Pussycat. I'm not sure Chromalot would keep up. Um, so, yeah, I think ultimately Pussycat would win on a judge's decision. And then it would face Reactor 2 in the Heat final. Now, Reactor has much better armour, yeah, very thick stuff, so Pussycat probably wouldn't be able to damage it. The problem is, Reactor 2 is just so slow, and its little flipper, aka the Flamp, wouldn't do much. And Pussycat would again just keep coming at Reactor 2, even shoving it around, and just getting slams with the saw, even though the saw wouldn't do much, and ultimately Pussycat would win. Then after that, nothing changes until Heat K, where we finally see Firestorm and Decapitator in action, and that, of course, that fight still plays out the same way. While Widow's Revenge, Destructible, and Suicidal Tendencies win their fights. And then, of course, Suicidal Tendencies pulls out and reinstates Rick. And then, well, Widow's Revenge is no match for Firestorm, so Firestorm just flips Widow's Revenge over very quickly and goes through. And then faces off against Rick and just flips Rick all over the place. Yeah, Rick just can't really keep up with Firestorm, so Firestorm 3 goes through. So yeah, the last heats, finally we come to Chaos 2, and Chaos 2 of course beats Storm Force in the same way, while Terahertz, Claude Hopper and Fluffy win their respective fights. Then Chaos 2 goes up against Claude Hopper. Now Chaos 2 might struggle to flip Claude Hopper over, considering that it's a walker, and walkers can have double the weight of the ones on wheels or tracks. Though I think Chaos 2 would just win on control and aggression, and would then go on to face Fluffy in the Heat final. Now, it's hard to say exactly how this would go, but again, this is best guess. Chaos 2 would come at Fluffy very quickly, get to the side and flip it over, come at it again, flip it once more, maybe treat this fight the same way as the fight with Smidsy in the real timeline. And Chaos 2, I think, would drive Fluffy against the arena wall, flip it, try and get it out the arena, but ends up having the same issue. And then in the rematch, it would sort of go the same way. What is wrong with this chair? I mean, Fluffy would try and get away, spin the disc up, or the rotating blades. Well, we'll just say its weapon. I mean, it might get one hit in on Chaos 2, but I think Chaos 2 would be too quick, get 2 or 3 flips in, and I feel like Fluffy would probably break down. And this isn't lazy writing, because I think the impact would ultimately be a bit much, especially since it has a history of reliability problems. I mean, take the real timeline fight with Pussycat. I mean, after Pussycat's blade came off, it then broke down. So, I I'm not sure what caused it, but it was more likely the impact. But either way, I just don't see Fluffy winning this really, so Chaos 2 will ultimately go through. Now for the semi-finals. So S3 against Bigger Brother would still happen and Bigger Brother would win. Then Hypnodisc and Wild Thing would meet again. Now even though they're matched for weaponry, I'm just not sure Wild Thing would win still. I don't know if there'd be a chance for Wild Thing to attack Hypnodisc's wheels. And Hypnodisc would just keep hitting Wild Thing on the side. Maybe Wild Thing could get a side attack in, but not necessarily do significant damage to Hypnodisc, but ultimately I can see this going the same way as their previous fight. And yeah, I think Hypnodisc is likely going to win on a judge's decision. And now for Firestorm against Spawn again. Now, I'm not too sure how this would go, considering they've never fought each other before. At this point in the series, like one big knock on Firestorm loosened the link. And again, it does depend who gets the first flip in. But I think as they come towards each other, Spawn again would slowly turn and flip Firestorm over. And depending on the impact, it would loosen the link. And again, this is not lazy writing, because remember, Firestorm fought Hypnodisc at this stage, and one hit from the disc just immobilised Firestorm as the link came out, so it was sort of like that, and I feel like being flipped by Spawn again would make it go something like that. And Firestorm would be dead in the water. And yeah, that's that. And Spawn again finally gets to the next stage of the semi-finals. So the losers melee is Firestorm 3, S3 and Wild Thing. Yeah, it would sort of go how the Series 6 semi-final fight between Firestorm and S3 would go, and also have a mix of the All-Stars battle between Firestorm 3 and Wild Thing. Maybe S3 would get a couple of hits in a Wild Thing in the process, but I feel like it would get to a point where a Firestorm probably would pin S3 almost up against the wall in the angle grinder. Although it might have been a bit easier to do in the Series 6 setting when you had the button for the floor spinning disc thing. But either way, I don't see Wild Thing really coming out on top, nor S3, so Firestorm is more likely to win. So now it comes back in, so at this stage we've now got Hypnodisc, Firestorm, Spawn again, and Bigger Brother. Now at this stage, they don't generally pit the highest ranked robots against each other, nor the lowest ranked against each other. And since Firestorm already fought Spawn again, that would mean that Firestorm would have to fight Bigger Brother, while Spawn again fights Hypnodisc. And yeah, I don't see Spawn again coming out on top here. I don't think it would get a chance to flip Hypnodisc. Even if it does, it would only be once, and Hypnodisc would quickly self-right and get some hits in on the side, and probably cause Spawn again to break down, maybe, because again has a history of, well, technical issues, well, more so in the semi-final stage and Series 6. So yeah, Hypnodisc would go through, and well, again, I'm pretty sure I covered a matchup between Firestorm and Bigger Brother already, but yeah, I think Firestorm would more than likely beat Bigger Brother. That's usually the case whenever they go up against each other. So now for semi-final number 2. The Dominator 2 beats Really Big Cheese as usual. And now at this point, Razor would face Pussycat. So now, because the grudge match happened after the 5th Wars, this would basically be that grudge match, which makes me wonder how the grudge match would have gone later on. Because it plays out in the exact same way, Pussycat wins and Razor goes through to the loser's melee. Following that is a battle of the former champions, Chaos 2 against Panic Attack. But I'm not so sure Panic Attack would win this, considering this is the point where it too is having issues internally. And yeah, I can see Chaos 2 flipping Panic Attack several times, more likely getting in from the front or the back, because the skirts aren't that easy to get under. But yeah, ultimately Chaos 2 wins this, and we have almost the same losers melee again, only Razor is there instead of Firestorm 3. So yeah, we've got Razor, the world champion, Panic Attack, the Series 2 champion, and Really Big Cheese. Now, Razor would probably be in trouble if Really Big Cheese was able to flip Razor over, but I don't see it happening. Razor would just get away too quickly, although Razor wouldn't be able to do anything to Really Big Cheese because, well, it's made of titanium, and that's not easy to damage. Yeah, Razor again would grip Really Big Cheese and push it around for a bit, but ultimately Really Big Cheese ends up breaking down, and Panic Attack is still having a few internal issues, and just gets grabbed by Razor and shoved around a lot. And ultimately Razor gets back in and would then have to face Dominator 2 while Chaos 2 takes on Pussycat. And yeah, this fight ends up being pretty much the same as the Series 4 matchup in the real timeline. The blade probably wouldn't break, well, not break, but stop working, but I'm pretty sure Pussycat, Chaos 2 would still do enough, maybe if they're lucky, flip Pussycat out the arena, but either way, Chaos 2 is more likely to win and goes through to the grand final for a third time in a row and fourth overall, and would be at this point would be the only robot, the only team to be in the grand final 4 times. Meanwhile, Razor would take on Dominator 2, another fight that I already covered. Unfortunately, I don't see Razor getting any further. Maybe it could grab Dominator 2, but it could easily escape the clutches and hit Razor a few times with the axe. Maybe even break the Shri neck. Either way, it would be tricky for Razor to win, and Dominator 2 would win on a judge's decision. So, this does change a lot, because unlike the real timeline, Razor doesn't win the fifth walls here, and Dominator 2 goes through to the grand final. So, we have a very different grand final lineup here, because we've got Hypnodisc, Chaos 2, Firestorm 3, and Dominator 2. And how it would be paired, again, we have to follow the same path as much as possible. So Hypnodisc would face Dominator 2, and Chaos 2 would face Firestorm 3. And the Hypnodisc versus Dominator 2 fight, that plays out the exact same way as in the actual timeline, and still becomes the most boring fight in the history of Robot Wars. Hypnodisc goes through to the top 2 yet again. Meanwhile, Chaos 2 and Firestorm have their rematch, but this time things are different. Chaos 2 might be able to flip Firestorm like a couple of times, but I think Firestorm is quick and manoeuvrable enough to get under Chaos 2 and flip it over. So, and this would keep going. I'm not sure it would get to a point where Chaos 2 could flip Firestorm out the arena, but I feel like it would get to a point where it would be the same situation as where Chaos 2 fought Bigger Brother and Danton Kier and ended up on its back, just pretty much out of gas. And because of this, Firestorm prevails and goes through to the grand final. Of course, again, I could be completely wrong here, but that's what I feel is more likely to happen. So now, third place playoff, Chaos 2 faces off against Dominator 2, another rematch, and this one is from the Northern Annihilator of Series 4. Now, Dominator 2 did win that encounter, but then again, there were other robots involved, and almost everyone ganged up on Chaos 2 at the time, but this time, no one else is involved, and I feel like this would go pretty much the same way as if Chaos 2 fought Steel Avenger. Sure, Dominator 2 would get some axe blows in, but Chaos 2 would flip Dominator 2 over a few times, and probably get it out the arena. In any case, what's likely to happen is Chaos 2 would win the fight. So Chaos 2 takes third place. So now we're at the grand final stage where Hypnodisc takes on Firestorm 3, another rematch, and this would play out in the same way as the third place playoff in the original timeline, only this time Firestorm has a working weapon and would actually be able to flip Hypnodisc over a few times. And because it would play out pretty much the same way as the playoff, it would even get to that point where Firestorm is under Hypnodisc, shoving it in the direction of the pit, and either they would still crash dive in there, or Firestorm could even do something fancy and flip Hypnodisc into the pit. But either way, Hypnodisc is dethroned and Firestorm is crowned the Series 5 champion. So, yeah, with this in mind, we now move on to Series 6. Now, I would do, like, an alternative to what would have happened, but again, I generally prefer to go with my best guess. So, I guess I could go back to the Firestorm against Spawn Again matchup and see what would happen if Firestorm beats Spawn Again there. But I'm not sure things would be that different. I mean, that loser's melee would still play out the same way, and we'd have S3 in that top 4 instead. And what would have happened then is Firestorm beats S3 and goes through, and Bigger Brother beats Hypnodisc, like one round earlier. And then in that case, Bigger Brother would be in the grand final instead of Chaos 2. And then, how would this have gone? We'd have Chaos 2, Firestorm, Dominator 2, Bigger Brother. Bigger Brother would beat Chaos 2, Firestorm would beat Dominator 2. Then we'd have the exact same playoff, but Firestorm would beat Bigger Brother in the grand final. So in any case, Firestorm is still winning the Fifth Wars in this scenario. But yeah, this would greatly determine the rankings of Hypnodisc and Bigger Brother. So anyway, moving on to the 6-4, carrying on from all the scenarios I talked about. God, we're 13 minutes in. Yeah, this is a very long one, I know, and that's what she said. So the seeds would be 1, Firestorm, whether it be 3 or 4, I'm not sure. 2, Hypnodisc. 3, Chaos 2. 4, Dominator 2. 5, Razor. And Bigger Brother would be seeded 6th, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Or would it? Hold on. Yeah, Pussycat and Wheelie Big Cheese don't come back. Wait, no. Spawn Again would be seeded 6th. Bigger Brother 7th. Then Panic Attack would still be seeded 8th. Wild Thing would still be seeded 9th. S3 is seeded 10th this time. While meanwhile, a Tornado... no, Stinger is seeded 11th and Tornado is still seeded 12th. So we still have the same seeds for the 6 wars, only in a different order, but they would still stay in their own battles and their own heats, only they'd be rearranged a little. So Firestorm's heat would now be Heat A, and Firestorm wins. Chaos 2's heat would be Heat B, and Danton Kia wins. And Razor's heat would be Heat C, Razor wins. Bigger Brother's heat would be Heat D, and Bigger Brother would win. Then, and yet from Heat E up to Heat R, no, Heat G, nothing changes. Then, yeah, Heat H is S3's heat, and S3 wins that. And yeah, again, we have Paddock Attack's heat for Heat I, nothing changes there. Then we come to Spawn Again's heat, which is now Heat J, Spawn Again wins. Then Dominator 2's heat, which is Heat K, Dominator 2 wins. And finally, Hypnodisc's heat, Heat L, where Hypnodisc wins. So now, moving on to the semi-finals, we would then have Firestorm against Wild Thing, Danton Kia against 13 Black, and Razor against Bigger Brother. So yeah, Firestorm would beat Wild Thing, Danton Kia would beat 13 Black, and Razor would beat Bigger Brother. As, yeah, that would basically play out the same way as in the Series 5 Grand Final in the original timeline. So, yeah, we have almost the same losers melee there, only Bigger Brother is there instead of Danton Kia, and yeah, Bigger Brother just beats the both of them and gets right back in. So then, the top 4 of that semi-final would of course be Firestorm, Razor, Bigger Brother, and Danton Kia. Now, because Bigger Brother already fought Razor, it would have to fight Firestorm again and lose. So Firestorm again goes through to the grand final, and becomes the second robot to get there 4 times in a row, and and then Razor, of course, still beats Danton Kia, like in the actual timeline. And finally, Razor goes through to the grand final. So now for the second semi-final of that year. So, yeah, this time Dominator 2 would face Tornado, Hypnodisc would fight Spawn again, and S3 would fight Terahertz. And, yeah, the Dominator 2 versus Tornado fight, that pretty much plays out the same way, you know, depending on which house robots are in there. If Matilda is still in that fight, it plays out the exact same way. Otherwise, Tornado beats Dominator 2 on a judge's decision, Hypnodisc then fights Spawn again, and beats it, because, yeah, Series 6 was not a great year for Spawn again, because it was plagued by so many problems. So, yeah, it's an easy win for Hypnodisc. Now, as for S3 against Terahertz, I'm a little unsure how this would go. But I actually think Terahertz would come out on top here, because it might be, because of the shape, it might be tricky for S3 to just hit it with the disc. And I think Terahertz can easily get at some angles where it can push S3 around and hit it with the axe. I don't know whether or not it would cut the aerial off, but I think Terahertz would leave some very nice dents on that cylindrical body shell of S3. And yeah, Terahertz would eventually win, even if it's through a judge's decision. So then the loser's melee is S3, Dominator 2, and Spawn again. But yeah, because of Spawn again's technical issues, I don't see it making it out alive, as it would get hit several times by S3's disc and axed by Dominator 2. And I don't think Dominator 2 would get so lucky with any axe blows on S3, because S3 will just keep hitting Dominator 2 on the side and would get straight back in. So now we've got, who we've got left? Hypnodisc, S3, Tornado, and Terahertz. So yeah, what would happen is Hypnodisc would face Terahertz and S3 would take on Tornado. Now, yeah, S3 I don't think would stand any chance against Tornado. Tornado would just shove it around too much, not get a chance to let the disc hit it. So yeah, because of this, Tornado goes through. Now as for Hypnodisc and Terahertz, it's hard to predict how this would go. But yeah, I feel like Hypnodisc would get some significant hits in and just keep out the way of the axe. I mean, I feel like any axe hits would just be a glancing blow, and Hypnodisc is more controlled than Terahertz. Yeah, I genuinely feel like Hypnodisc would get some good hits in on the side, maybe immobilise Terahertz, and just go through to the grand final yet again. So that's another one that's made it 4 times in a row. So yeah, it's almost the same Series 6 final, only Hypnodisc is there instead of Terahertz. Now, I'm not sure who'd get paired against who. It depends whether or not the producers would want to see a Hypnodisc versus Razor fight in the grand final. Now, if they did want that, then they would have to make it so that Firestorm fights Razor and Tornado fights Hypnodisc, even though from Series 4 onwards they made it so that different semi-final winners would face off against each other. And again, they can't pit the top 2 ranked against each other, against the bottom ranked, if that makes sense. So, like in this situation, they can't put Firestorm and Hypnodisc against each other. You know? So, if they did that, here's how this would play out. But Razor would defeat Firestorm. I guess it would be played out in the same way as the Series 5 Grand Final Eliminator fight. So, Firestorm is dethroned and the World Champion goes through, whereas Tornado against Hypnodisc, well, that unfortunately plays out in the same way as their actual fight in the semi-finals in the real timeline. Hypnodisc is just shunted all over the place and Tornado wins on a judge's decision. So then Firestorm and Hypnodisc face off again in the playoff, And yeah, I guess Hypnodisc is still suffering from that fight, and Firestorm just beats it easily, even to the point where Hypnodisc would break down, along with the fact that it's got a weaker disc than the Series 4 and 5 version. So once again, Firestorm takes third place. And then the grand final fight between Razor and Tornado plays out in the exact same way as the actual timeline, with Tornado winning the 6 floors. Now, if they didn't care about trying to get Razor and Hypnodisc in the top two, then not much really changes. So, in that case, Tornado would fight Firestorm and Razor would fight Hypnodisc. And the grand final eliminator fight between Firestorm and Tornado plays out the exact same way. And but as for Razor against Hypnodisc, well, this goes back to what I said in another episode, where it depends on the era. If it's like Series 3 era or Series 6 era, Razor wins. If it's Series 4 era, Hypnodisc wins. Whereas for Series 5 era, it depends on who gets to whom first. But as I already stated, I feel like Hypnodisc probably would at best guess. But since this is Series 6 era, Razor wins that fight. And again, we have the same playoff and the same grand final, so it doesn't change. Now, Series 7, the fun part. Now, unfortunately, Hypnodisc and Razor don't return, but not a lot would be different, really. But I think the only difference is that Bigger Brother and Terahertz would swap seeds, literally, and then the others would be the same. So Bigger Brother would be third and Terahertz would be fourth. And then, because of the way a Series 7 panned out, along with the fact that Grim Reaper from Terahertz's Heat 1 and Typhoon 2 from Bigger Brother's Heat 1, and we're in the same semi-finals, literally nothing changes. So, besides a slightly different order of heats, nothing changes, and just everything plays out the exact same way, with Typhoon 2 ultimately winning. So, yeah, this is pretty much what would have happened if Firestorm 2 won that judge's decision against Dominator 2. Hypnodisc would win Series 4, Firestorm 3 would win Series 5, and Razor, unfortunately, never becomes UK champion, and Chaos 2 never becomes the only robot in history to keep the title. And then, like I said, regarding the Firestorm versus Spawn Again fight, I'm not too sure much would have changed. But let's say, for the sake of argument, Firestorm did beat Spawn Again, and everything played out like I described earlier before talking about Series 6. It would have it so that Firestorm, for Series 6 seeds, it would still be 1 Firestorm, Bigger Brother would still be seeded 2, then 3 Chaos 2, 4 Dominator 2, Hypnodisc would be seeded 5th, Razor would be seeded 6th, and then yeah, S3 would be 7th, like in the original timeline, 8 Panic Attack, 9 Wild Thing, 10 S3, no, 10 Spawn again. So yeah, basically, yeah, it's still the same. 11 Stinger, 12 Wild Thing. So yeah, let's just explore this real quick. So yeah, Firestorm would still win Heat A, Danton Kia Heat B, Hypnodisc Heat C, and then obviously nothing changes with Heats D, E, F, G, H, I, and then of course Razor wins Heat J, Dominator 2 wins Heat K, and as usual Big Brother wins Heat L. So, and then again, Series 6 semi-finals, Firestorm still beats Wild Thing, Danton Kia still beats 13 Black, and then of course we'd have Hypnodisc and S3 fight each other here. But yeah, I'm fairly sure Hypnodisc would beat S3 even in its Series 6 form. I mean, maybe S3 might get a couple of hits in on Hypnodisc, but wouldn't really do much unless it hits the disc head on, but I'm not sure that's likely to happen, which would mean S3 would face 13 Black and Wild Thing, and Wild Thing isn't beating either of those robots. So yeah, Wild Thing gets trashed, but I'm not sure who'd win between S3 and 13 Black. I mean, even if S3 hit 13's Black's discs, I don't think it would do much. Whatever 13 Black's discs were made of at the time of Series 6 was pretty sturdy stuff. I mean, not even Dominator 2's axe did anything, really. So I actually think 13 Black would win that loser's melee. So then we'd have Firestorm, Hypnodisc, 13 Black, and Danton Kia through. And because with the top 4 stage of the semi-finals and the grand final eliminators, they'd usually have the top ranked robot face the lowest ranked one. And dependent on appearances, I suppose. We'd have Firestorm face Danton Kia and Hypnodisc face 13 Black, and Firestorm would beat Danton Kia in the same way as the All-Stars, second All-Stars tournament, and now Hypnodisc versus 13 Black, a battle of the discs. That would be a tricky one to predict. But I don't know. I mean, 13 Black would have a good chance, but I think Hypnodisc could get the more significant damage in. Depending. It's also better controlled as well. So I don't know if 13 Black will get that lucky. Because Hypnodisc would get some significant hits in on 13 Black's discs once they slow down, I think Hypnodisc could last very long here and go through. So yeah, going back to semi-final 2, so again Tornado would still beat Dominator 2, Bigger Brother and Razor would still face off and Razor would win, and Terahertz beats Spawn again. So again, we have a very similar losers melee again, only Dominator 2 is there instead of Hypnodisc. So again, Spawn again still has some issues, and I know in the real timeline Dominator 2 did win a judge's decision against Bigger Brother, but that was only because Bigger Brother seemed to get slow and sluggish near the end, and get caught by kill a lot. But these issues don't seem to happen at the point of the loser's melee, so I think Bigger Brother will still come out on top here. And would then go on to face Terahertz, while Tornado and Razor meet like 2 rounds early, with Tornado winning that. And then of course Terahertz beats Bigger Brother. And again, we have almost the same grand final, only Hypnodisc is there instead of Razor. So now some interesting things would happen. Firestorm would fight Terahertz, and Hypnodisc would fight Tornado, and well, we know how the Hypnodisc versus Tornado fight would go. And as for the other fights, Terahertz would win here. I know against Firestorm in the playoff of the actual timeline, I hope you're keeping up with all this, by the way, Terahertz breaks down and loses, but I feel like that was mainly because of the damage Razor did. At this point we have a fully functioning, fully healthy Terahertz, which just beats the stuffing out of Firestorm, and yeah, the champion is dethroned, loses a lot of manoeuvrability, and Terahertz goes through. But yeah, Firestorm should be significantly repaired enough to face Hypnodisc, and yeah, Firestorm beats Hypnodisc and gets 3rd place, which means that Terahertz would face a Tornado in the grand final, and yeah, get beaten very quickly. So Tornado still wins the 6th war in this timeline. Now in another episode I did already talk about a scenario where Terahertz finishes 2nd. I forget which episode it was. I can't remember if it was the one, what if Hypnodisc, Razor, Dominator 2, S3, Wild Thing, or Chaos 2 return for Series 7, or whether it was the other Robot Wars one I think it was the first one, the one that got uploaded on the 29th of May. So I'm not going to go over that again, because, well, more often than not, with most scenarios, Typhoon 2 will always come out on top in the 7th Wars. So yeah, that pretty much covers it. Sorry this was such a long episode. Hope that was easy to follow. But yeah, you need to be as big of a Robot Wars fan as me, and just look on the Robot Wars wiki to just keep up with everything and know the history of Robot Wars from the 4th Wars to the 7th Wars. Yeah, was I spot on, or was there anything I missed? Be sure to let me know. Anyway, thanks for watching, stay safe, and I'll catch you guys later. See ya.